We spare no expense on this YouTube presentation. Little green men behind us. Little green men. I know you don't believe me, but anybody with leopard skin glasses has to believe in little green men. Today we're going to talk about aliens. That's right. Are you an alien? Are you an alien? Now, I'm not going to talk about little green men, and I'm not going to talk about all these bodies that are supposedly held by the US Secret Service of little green men that have crashed, and I'm not going to talk about all those aliens which seeded the earth years and years, centuries and thousands of years ago so they can actually harvest us, you know, human cows. No, I'm not going to talk about anything like that, because I'm sensible. I'm a very sensible person. I read the Australian Constitution every day. I put it under my pillow, and in the morning I kiss it, because the Australian Constitution is the Bible of Australia. It's a little bit like this. A lot of people don't understand what a constitution is. A constitution is a rule book. The High Court judges, they're the umpires, which make decisions about the rules. Parliament, well, they're basically the players in the game. They've got to follow the rules. And we, the Australian people, we're the spectators. So it's very simple. It's a very simple concept, the Constitution. It's a rule book. So as I said before, think of it as a football game, or a volleyball game, or a cricket game, or any game, backyard cricket, or water polo, whatever you like. There's a rule book. There's people adjudicating on the rules, which are the umpires. There's the players, which in this case is the federal parliamentarians, and there's the spectators, which is the Australian people. Now, the Australian High Court was asked to make a very important decision a few days ago. What is an alien under the Australian Constitution? Now, we all think we're Australians. If we're a permanent resident, if we're born here, we think of ourselves as Australians. And when you go through the Australian Constitution, there's them, little green people, the aliens, and us, you and me. We're real Australians, those that were born here, or so we thought. Now, the High Court was asked to make a very important determination. Two Aboriginal men, Mr. David Love and another gentleman whose name I've temporarily forgotten, who spent 501 days in immigration detention, Mr. Toms. They were asked to make a decision. Now, both these men were born overseas. One was born in Papua New Guinea, one was born in New Zealand. Both have Aboriginal parents, one of their parents was Aboriginal, and they both came back to Australia as young people. They became permanent residents, never took out Australian citizenship, which they were entitled to do, found themselves in trouble with the law, arrested, jailed, and once they were about to be released, they were going to be deported. One back to New Guinea, one back to New Zealand, because they were aliens under the Act. Aliens. And the Australian Parliament has the power to make legislation regarding non-citizens, which are aliens. Let's not forget that when the Australian Constitution came into force on the 1st of January 1901, before I was born, although I may look that old, before I was born, we were all British subjects. We were subjects of the Queen. And it wasn't until 1949, through an Act of Parliament, the idea of citizenship arose. So the High Court was asked to determine whether these men were aliens under the Constitution. And the High Court, through a narrow majority of 4-3, which is the most narrowest majority when you've got 7 High Court judges, 4-3, it's a little bit like a referee can't make up his or her mind regarding a particular issue and sends it upstairs for a video look. Well, that's what the High Court did. 4-3 found that it was ludicrous, and that wasn't their words, that's my words, because they're very, very, very sedate people. It was ludicrous to think that somebody who had an Aboriginal parent was an alien. And the High Court found that as far as the Immigration Act was concerned, both these men could not be considered to be aliens. One was actually on release, awaiting deportation, and the other gentleman had been in prison, in immigration detention for 501 days, and he was released on the 12th of February. Now, people think, well, this is a very rare situation. It's got nothing to do with what's going on. The High Court is very interesting, and the Australian Constitution is very interesting, because the judges, and that's the referees, as I said, in this constitutional game where you've got, as I said before, you've got the rules, the judges, the players and the spectators, that's you and me, had to make a ruling on what is an alien under the Constitution. Because this country has made some really, really passed some vicious legislation regarding aliens. And it started with federation on the 1st of January 1901. With some of the first legislation that was passed in 1901 was legislation to deport Kanaks from northern New South Wales and Queensland back to the Pacific. And Kanaks were people, men and women, who were kidnapped and sold into slavery to work as cheap labour on the cane fields in North Queensland and northern New South Wales. And although some of them had lived here for 20 or 30 years, because of the legislation, legislative power which the Constitution gave them regarding the term alien, they deported over 20,000 of these people. Then during World War II, we took in a number of Indonesian refugees during the course of the war. Many of these had associations with Dutch colonialists, and when the war was over, they were forcefully deported under the Aliens Act. And when you look at what's happening with asylum seekers and refugees, you've seen some of the most inhumane laws enacted, because under the Australian Constitution, if you are considered to be an alien, the government can constitutionally and legally detain you indefinitely, although you've committed no crime. And we've seen that over and over again. We've seen people detained for up to 10 years in this country, and now 7 years in Nauru and New Guinea, Manus Island, for seeking asylum. So to be considered an alien in this country is basically to be considered a non-person. You have no rights, no constitutional rights. So I can hear you say, what's that got to do with me? I was born in this country. I was born in this country. I'm an Australian citizen. Obviously, if you're a permanent resident, you weren't born in this country and you've got problems. But I'm an Australian citizen. I was born in this country. I'm an Australian citizen. But the Australian government, successive conservative and reactionary governments, have actually redefined what Australian citizenship is over and over again through legislation because of the alien provisions in the Australian Constitution. For example, you can be born in this country of asylum seeker parents, or one asylum seeker parent, and you are not granted automatic citizenship, although you were conceived in the country, you were born in the country, and you lived here, as we've seen with the family from Billawheeler, who are facing deportation regarding a last-ditch attempt to keep them in the country, who are currently on Christmas Island. So to be an alien is to have no rights. Not the right to vote, but no rights whatsoever. The government at any time can remove you. Now the problem is the government has been actually defining and redefining, the government of the day has defining and redefining what an alien is. And the current debate, which has been put on hold by this High Court decision, the current debate is somebody who is entitled to a dual citizenship, are they an alien? And what the Australian government has passed legislation which strips people of their Australian citizenship, irrespective of whether they were born here or not, if they have a right to a dual citizenship. Not because they are dual citizens, but if they have a right to a dual citizenship. And they're talking about deporting people to countries they haven't lived in, and their parents maybe didn't even live in, because you've got some right For example, if you're Greek or you're Iranian, you can never, if you're a descendant of a Greek and Iranian, you can never absolve yourself of that citizenship. So this High Court decision has very important ramifications about defining the term alien and actually stopping the federal parliament from passing legislation which strips individuals of citizenship rights and birthrights, which is the central important essence of being a citizen. If you're a citizen of a country, what that means is you have the right to travel, you have the right to a passport, you have the right to be treated respectfully by the country's agencies. But if you're an alien, you're basically here on borrowed time, and the government of the day can pass legislation to deport you at any time. This is an exceptionally important question. Now, interestingly, the current decision that found by a majority of 4-3, which is an exceptionally slim majority, that both these Aboriginal men were not covered, were not aliens under the Immigration Act, and were not covered by the Immigration Act. They found justification in the Mabo High Court decision in 1992, which highlighted that Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders were at the mercy of the Queen, at the mercy of the monarchy. And the monarchy had a primary responsibility to them, and they actually interpret this. So you've got this old rule book. Things have changed. Things have changed in Australia since 1901. Everything has changed. Here you have the umpires trying to look at the rules and interpret them in the 21st century. And it's a very difficult situation because they can only work within the constraints of the Constitution. They can't change the Constitution. The only people who can change the Constitution is the Australian people. But unfortunately in Australia, unlike Switzerland, where if you've got a certain number of people who ask for a constitutional question to be put to the people, it's put to the people. In Australia, it's only Parliament, a majority in both houses of Parliament, which can determine what question is put to the Australian people. So as spectators, we really have no say as far as the Constitution is concerned, unless the players, that's the parliamentarians, allow us to make that decision. And obviously when they put a constitutional question to us, it's about increasing their power at our expense, and that's why most constitutional questions are rejected by the Australian people, because it doesn't help us. But the dilemma is, there is one chapter missing from the Australian Constitution, and it's an exceptionally important chapter. It's a little bit like not having a chapter on what is a goal. How many points does a goal get? You know, the game, you can't play the game. You don't know who's going to win. And that chapter is human rights. It's about the protection of the individual from the arbitrary exercise of state power. There is no chapter in the Australian Constitution which protects you or me, not just aliens, who they've got absolute power over, but you or me as citizens from the arbitrary exercise of state power. That's why legislation has been passed in the past 20 years in the guise of anti-terrorist legislation, which has stripped us of inalienable common law rights. Because unlike in England, where common law is king, in Australia, Parliament is king. Parliament, through a simple majority in both houses of Parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate, can strip you of any common law right it decides, unless the umpire, which is the High Court, decides that it's gone a little bit too far and what it's done is illegal. Because what a constitution is supposed to do is to protect the people. Protect the people from the state, protect the people from the government of the day, protect the people from outside interference. It's just there to protect the people. But unfortunately, the Australian Constitution is nothing more than a document which regulates the relationships between the states, which are the former colonies, and the central government, which is the federal government. And with more and more and more power shifting to the central government, we are now creating a society where rights and liberties which we should be able to freely exercise in a democratic society no longer exist. And that's why this High Court decision on who is an alien, who is a citizen, and the fact that these two men, Aboriginal men, were found to be citizens, were found not to be aliens, not citizens but not to be aliens under the Constitution, is such an important change in direction in this country. It's like a warboat or a cruiser shooting a cannon across your deck to stop you what you're doing. So let's hope this High Court decision has some dampener on the ability of the state to remove our rights and to make us aliens with no rights, although we were born in this country and we have considered ourselves to be citizens for so long. Thank you for watching today's YouTube presentation. Next week, who knows, maybe the aliens will come and take me. I'll have a chat to them. Little green men, aliens. That's how we treat human beings. It's quite extraordinary to live in the country of Australia, the land of the brave and the free, or is that the land of milk and honey? Was that neither for some? Who knows? Listen in, have a look next week. We'll find another great backing for you, another fence somewhere in this great city of Melbourne. And it's not my city, it's not your city, it's their city, but they allow us to live here as long as we pay rent or our mortgage. So all the best, and see you next week. Or you'll see me, I won't see you, will I?